people like us are so into the weeds every day, we forget about the bigger picture. Donald Trump's in a courthouse right now. He's in a courtroom this morning because he's on trial. He's a defendant. He's been indicted 4 times. First time in history. We're 3.5 years removed from this guy trying to overthrow an American election. And you want to treat this with kid gloves? No, we can't. He's a lawless, un-American psychopath.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. We got a fun one today. Former congressman from Illinois, former Republican presidential candidate in 2020. He hosts the podcast White Flag with Joe Walsh. It's Joe Walsh. How you doing, brother? Welcome back to the Bulwark Podcast.
Hey, Tim Miller, it's great to be with you. And I just want to say you all are doing phenomenal work at the Bulwark. Good job.
Man, thank you so much. We're working hard on it. It's important stuff. Back at you. And I'm happy we were able to have this conversation. For context, I wouldn't even really call it a disagreement. I was being a little cheeky on the internet the other day. About, how to assess Joe Biden's Israel performance. So we had a little disagreement, Joe and I, but certainly not a big disagreement compared to some of the other disagreements we've got these days. But I want to hash all that out with them at the end. It's better to do it long form. Twitter is not that good for those kind of nuanced conversations, if you haven't noticed.
Not at all, Tim. So you were super respectful and I was in kind, and that's kind of an unusual thing on Twitter.
It is. So I want to hash out just a little bit more long form at the end, but we got to do a little news first. So Joe Biden yesterday came out and I guess challenged would maybe be a strong word. He tried to make it seem like he was challenging Donald Trump, being tough, but he was being more assertive and saying, hey, I've got a proposal. We're going to do 2 debates. One in June, one in September. June would be the earliest presidential debate in memory, because it would happen before the conventions, which is not traditional. This is not a traditional campaign, though, so there's something to be said for that. First one would be on CNN with Jake Tapper and Dana Bash being the moderators. I kind of just am curious on your take on that, and what Biden's strategic move, whether it made sense. There was some blowback. Nate Silver was a little upset that he went around the Commission on Presidential Debate Commission. Yeah. So anyway, what's your take on that whole discussion?
Maybe it's your take too, Tim. Look, I as someone who is all in for Biden, I think this was a really good, smart, cool thing to do. But I think he had to do it. I worry that he's losing right now. And more importantly, I think the only way Biden can beat Trump, and it pains me to say this, is he's got to take the fight to Trump. He's got to show the American people he's up to the job. I don't think Trump has anything to prove. I mean, he's an utter asshole. Everybody knows that. But Biden has something to prove. He's got to prove he's up to the job, that he's not too old. So I think the more of this he can do, going after Trump, challenging Trump, the better.
Yeah, I agree with that. What's your take on that as it relates to the trial? So at the end of the video that he put out, challenging Trump to the debate, he made a little cheeky joke about how I hear you're available on Wednesdays. And then the campaign put out a T-shirt you can buy that's like available on Wednesdays. I forget exactly what the shirt says. Some joke about how Trump is only available on Wednesdays because of his trial schedule. Biden's been pretty reticent to engage publicly on the trials at all, really. He has turned up the heat on that a little bit, making a few, but it's more like this, making a few offhanded jokes, offhanded remarks. What do you think is the right approach to that? I mean, on the one hand, you've got all these Trump fluffers going up there having press conferences. The Democrats aren't really doing that. Some might say that they should be leaning into this more and attacking Trump on the trial stuff more. Others say it's better to kind of take the high ground on this. Where do you land on that?
Tim, I think he's got to fucking go after it. I mean, attack him and make fun of him. I love it. I don't know who it was. It might have been Steve Hayes at the Dispatch thought it was a terrible move. And I respectfully said, I don't get that. I mean,
thought it was a terrible move to make fun of the trial.
Yeah. To Biden's line about, are you free Wednesday nights? Like, I guess he didn't like that, or the fact that now the Democrats, I think, are selling T-shirts that say something like, I'm free on Wednesday nights. I love that stuff. You and I people like us are so into the weeds every day. We forget about the bigger picture. Donald Trump's in a courthouse right now. He's in a courtroom this morning because he's on trial. He's a defendant. He's been indicted 4 times. First time in history. We're 3.5 years removed from this guy trying to overthrow a fucking American election. And you want to treat this with kid gloves? No, we can't. He's a lawless, un-American psychopath. I think Trump is. So I think Biden's got to lean into it and go after him hard and make fun of him as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Brian Beutler, who we've had on the pod a couple weeks ago, who comes from the left, but he thinks he wants more shameless Democratic surrogates all around doing what, Vivek and all them are doing, going up there and doing what Vivek and Byron Donalds are doing. But on the other side, I kind of agree with that. I don't, the New York delegation, Dan Goldman, Jamie Raskin's good at this. Find the people that are good at this. And shouldn't they be up there? And if the Republicans are going to turn this into a circus and try to own the narrative around Trump's trial, I kind of feel like the Democrats should be doing that too. I was compelled by that argument. What do you think,
Tim? I'm equally compelled. I hadn't heard that before, but yeah, I agree with you. That makes a lot of sense. Look, again, Joe Biden is running against a former president who's been indicted 4 times, 88 some counts. Donald Trump is lawless. In my mind, he's a criminal. Make that the campaign. The only caveat I'd say, Tim, is if it's just Biden surrogates doing it, I think it hurts Biden. Because again, I go back to this. I think Biden's only got one obstacle. And I think if he overcomes this obstacle, he wins in November. Is he up to the job? Is he too old? And he's got to prove he's not. So I think in addition to the surrogates, man, Biden's got to be doing it as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. One more in our period of agreement here at the top. I think we're going to agree on this one too. Mitt Romney, God love Willard. His heart's in the right place on all this. But he was out there on Stephanie Rule's show the other night saying that Biden should have pardoned Trump. And not only that, he went so far as to say that Biden should have been pressuring, I guess, Alvin Bragg to drop the charges against Trump, in part because of norms and mores, but in part because he thought that'd be a good political strategy, just kind of take the air out of Trump's grievance balloon. I mean, that seems absolutely absurd to me. I assume you too, but we might as well at least hash it out really quick. Mitt is in absentia. He's welcome on the Bulwark Podcast anytime to expand on that case. But where are you on that?
So, maybe this doesn't make sense, Tim, but you've watched me the last 6 years. I've publicly apologized maybe 997 times.
Yeah. You've mellowed quite a bit. Even your voice is a little bit mellow. Like your whole mien has mellowed. You know what I mean? Like it's I don't know. You've chilled quite a bit.
You're right. Like I've had to publicly apologize for 6 years how Joe Walsh, crazy Tea Party guy, helped lead to Trump. And I did, and people like me did. But every time Mitt opens his mouth, Tim, I think that an utterly out of touch Republican establishment led to Trump too. Because Mitt still doesn't get it, period. He still doesn't understand the moment, period. I think you're right. His heart is always in the right place, but he's just utterly clueless. Trump tried to overthrow an American election. You don't pardon a president for an unprecedented attack on our democracy like that. You don't pardon him for something like that. You throw the book at him. I just don't. I do understand. That's Mitt.
Yeah. How do you think about that? Going back to that time, because I sort of reflect on this, and sometimes, our critics who think we've gone too rabid anti-Trump will say this, that we're kind of making the same mistakes we did in the past, just on with the other jersey. How do you think about that Tea Party time? Because, in my head, I'm always like, look, I got, you were doing Tea Party talk radio. I was doing opposition research. We both have a lot to apologize for,
Yeah.
And, my mindset at the time, I was always aggressive. This is a campaign. Our side needs to win. The other side needs to lose. This is a zero-sum game. My job is to be as aggressive as possible to help my guys win, right? Like that was my mindset as a political operative. And now I look at it on the other side and think, man, I had some blind spots when I was doing that. Like there were some arguments that I was advancing that weren't really true, or that were exaggerated, or that were dog whistle, or whatever. And so as I flip it now on the other side, sometimes I feel like the Democrats are like have the opposite problem, like they're checking themselves too much, right? And when I want them to like be more aggressive, right? Like attack, go after the other side, go for the jugular. But how do you balance that without kind of like tipping back over into doing some of the same mistakes that I think contributed to radicalizing people on the right? How do you sort of balance making aggressive arguments, going after the other side, wanting to win, with doing it with integrity? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a great way to put it, Tim. That's an interesting dynamic you set up there, because you're right. I was incentivized to piss my audience off, to inflame them. Right. And I did that too well, too often. I got way ahead of my skis. I think the difference here is you and I have learned from that. And I think the difference is Trump. I mean, we have a real factual, truthful thing in front of us. Yeah. He lost an election. He refused to concede, refused to participate in the peaceful transfer of power. And then he did everything he fucking could to try to overthrow that result. I mean, that's all there. And I'm with you in that I don't think Democrats even now sufficiently understand the threat he is. And Tim, I don't think Democrats sufficiently understand that this guy could win. And I think it's incumbent upon people like you and me to, with love and respect, pound Democrats with that truth as much as we can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's where I land on the slide. I don't know. I think about it. I've got my Catholic guilt now. I'm renting my own garments. My editor, when I wrote the book, my editor was like, "Take off the hair shirt," an old Catholic joke. But I don't know. I feel like sometimes we deserve the hair shirt, and I want to make sure I'm not making the same mistakes as before. But you're right. And the category difference is the threat of Trump.
And I'm not going to, and Tim, I don't think you would, as the Oppo research guy you were and the right-wing media guy I was, I'm not going to veer from the truth. And there were times back in the old Joe Walsh days where I would embellish and spin. I won't do that in attacking Trump. And we have kind of the factual case right there.
Yeah, we don't need to. That is one of the benefits. Okay.
Yeah.
A couple people haven't learned from this lesson. So before we go deep on hashing out Israel and how to walk the line with Joe Biden, I want us to chuckle a little bit, and kind of, it's a new segment that's a little bit outrage,
cool.
A little bit humor, and it's called The Right Stuff. I don't know, do you know Johnny McEntee? Johnny McEntee, the deputy president, the guy that was running the Trump personnel department?
Yeah, that's right. Okay,
well, he's got a dating site now called The Right Stuff that has a TikTok account that does viral TikTok videos, so I want to get to his latest TikTok in a second. But first, we're expanding the segment out to other crazy people doing right-wing social media posts, and I want to play a little bit from the Secretary of State candidate in Missouri. Here was a video she put out earlier this week.
In America, you can be anything you want. Don't be weak and gay. Stay fucking hard.
Already the show goes on.
Wait. Okay. In America, you can be anything you want. That was good. I was with her on that.
Yeah.
Don't be weak and gay was the next line. And then she's running in a Kevlar vest. She's never served in the military. She's weirdly running in a vest for some reason. What is happening, Joe? I mean, even in your craziest Tea Party days, like that ad, you would have looked at that and been like, "This is a spoof," right?
Well, Tim, like even in my days, like I'm a huge freaking gun guy. I couldn't imagine doing a campaign ad holding an AR-15. But I need context, Tim Miller. And I saw it, but I didn't hear the ad yesterday. When she says "don't be whatever" and "don't be gay," what did she mean by gay?
You can be anything you want. Don't be weak and gay. And so she'd be tough, be strong, be masculine, be heterosexual, expand the species. Don't be weak and gay, Joe. Be tough and straight.
So I know we're supposed to chuckle over this, and we should, but the serious point, Tim Miller, is the base to which she's pointing to is just utterly radicalized now. And so this kind of shit, divisive, ugly shit, works with the base.
Yeah.
Don't be weak or gay.
Don't be weak and gay. It's interesting. They're trying on this gender stuff and sexuality stuff. They know that they've lost the battle on like gay marriage and gay rights. And so that is why this is now pivoted to obviously to trans folks, but also to going back to scaremongering about kids and then pivoting into this more like alpha thing. Okay, you can have your little gay marriage, but being gay still is bad, right? And you're still weak and we're really tough. We're alpha chads. Remember the Ron DeSantis ad with all the muscled guys?
Yeah.
You know, like that's their new way into it, right? Don't you think?
Yes. And again, one of the themes of our conversation this morning is Democrats jump all over shit like this because the vast majority of the American people are tolerant. And
Yes.
I think, Tim, and this is a longer conversation, I've always felt as someone who engaged in the culture wars back in the day, Democrats have always been afraid to engage in the culture wars. And I think they could and should, because I think most Americans generally are with them on this stuff.
Yeah. Amen. I there's this thing like, don't platform this woman, don't play this video, don't give her attention. And it's like, no, actually embarrass these people, give them attention. This is not making fun of gay people is not popular. All right. It might help her in her little primary, but okay. Like broadly speaking, the broader battle, I make the same fight about gun stuff. We'll just do this right now. Because you're a little bit stronger on Second Amendment issues than I am. But just as a general matter, I've been making this argument to Democrats for a while on being on offense on the culture wars of there's certain elements of the gun debate, like Beto did this wrong, I'm going to take all your guns. But there's certain elements, like for example, having easy access to guns if you're an 18-year-old. You're a 21-year-old even, right? And I've been saying to my Democratic friends, like they should be running ads. People kind of forget how young 18-year-olds look. Like they should. You're saying I wouldn't have had an AR-15 in my ad. I want ads that have it's the high school and it's 18-year-olds walking through the high school with the AR-15s. Because I think that when people start seeing that, they're like, whoa, like this is great. Like we should be banning. Like this is an easy call, right? Like if you can't drink, you can't hold a gun. Or maybe there's an exception if you go through a certain number of courses or whatever. There's certain licensing you can do if you're under 21. But like that seems like a winner for Democrats if they would be less scared of the issue.
And you and I probably disagree on this issue, but I think more Americans would agree with you. And
you would disagree that 18-year-olds? You think 18-year-olds should be able to get a gun? An AR-15?
I think, Timmy, that if we're going to let an 18-year-old use a gun to go off and defend his country, that 18-year-old should be able to carry a gun when he's back home. So I have a problem on that part of it. But I have a problem with if we're going to allow an 18-year-old to go off and fight and defend his country, why don't we let an 18-year-old drink? I tend to be a little more libertarian on that stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Okay. Well, no, all right. I'm with you.
But Tim, I think most Americans probably disagree with me on that. But then on the gun issue, I think most Democrats ought to lean into doing whatever the hell we can do before a gun is bought. And if you want to talk about the age or universal background checks or red flag laws, all of this stuff, these are winners for Democrats.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. The right stuff segment is kind of veering off track. All right, we've got one more. We got one more piece of sound for the right stuff. Here's Johnny McEntee on TikTok.
If you say Palestinians deserve a homeland just for themselves, you're woke. But if you say white people deserve a homeland just for themselves, you're racist?
Wow.
Were you compelled by that?
Wow.
Are you compelling?
I do know who would be compelled by that. But my God, again, what Trump has allowed, Tim, is all of these folks to come out from under where they were and become voices and fairly prominent, being as radicalized and as ugly as they can be. And it's rewarded by that extreme.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I know this is maybe another issue that I don't know where you are on this, but like this is why I get kind of flustered by the cancel culture stuff. Like I don't love canceling people. I'm not, I'm a free speech person, but like this whole victim status that like, oh, conservatives are being silenced. It's like kind of the opposite, right? Like this is like if you want to be a douche bro who talks about how white people deserve their own homeland, like this is like the greatest time in history for you. I mean, you can be a campus leader of TPUSA. You could go viral on TikTok. Like if you had these views in 1982, you would be, writing a letter to the editor, and the editor would be like, "This is a crazy person. I'm not putting this in the newspaper." And so in a lot of ways, like free speech is blooming right now, and yet there's this victim culture about it.
And I agree with you. I want it to bloom. Good, bad, and ugly. I want it all to bloom. And how do we defeat ugly speech like that with other speech? Like, I don't want to shut it up. But we were in this, it's kind of a balance because what's his name? Harrison Butker, the
Harrison
Kansas
Butker,
City Chiefs kicker who spoke at a Catholic university and expressed his very fundamentalist Catholic views, which I, as a Catholic, find repugnant. But like,
my mother's a daily church-going Catholic, and I was like, that's some weird shit. I guess it's fundamentalist Catholic views, but it's a very small sect.
That's a very small sect, and that's out there. But he's at a Catholic university.
Yeah,
he's got a right to express the views, and we have a right to condemn him. Do I think he should lose his job as an NFL kicker because of that? No, but the Chiefs are free to do what they want if they want to keep him or not. So there is a consequence if you express your views, but you're free to express them.
Yeah, look, this is why I was like seeing somebody tweet this morning about how Harrison's getting canceled. We'll see if that happens. He should be able to kick balls for the Chiefs. Like I don't really care one way or the other about that. But he also should be able to get mocked for his weird speech where he starts crying, talking about how his wife's life started when she met him. Yeah. It's like this, and how she serves him and makes him a better person by staying in the kitchen. Sorry, bro. Like, if you're gonna do that speech and get all emotional talking about your wife's subservience, like people are gonna pick on you. Okay, that's Absolutely. Good. That was the longest right stuff yet. But
it worked, Tim. It worked.
We are finding our footing. That was the right stuff. I mostly just like the New Kids on the Block, to be honest. All right, let's get into business. Here we go. This all started, this is a little debate we had, yourself, Jonah Goldberg, myself, some other people, when Joe Biden, during his CNN interview, talked about limiting offensive weapons to Israel if Bibi went into Rafah. Jonah Goldberg, put out that he's hearing from a lot of reliably anti-Trump people, really anti-Trump people. They've had it with Biden tonight. Anecdotal to be sure, but very telling in my circle. I replied that I think these people are children, that you can disagree with people and not then all of a sudden go back to Trump. He didn't like that too much. We'll get into that a little bit more. You then wrote, I'll never vote for Trump. I'm still all in for Biden. But all of us in this uneasy Biden coalition, from lefty to never Trumper, have a red line. And if Biden keeps separating from Israel, he'll cross my red line. I hope he doesn't. I replied to you, nothing but respect for Joe. But I'd like to say I have no red line. I'll vote for every single person in American political life against Trump. The girl at the Columbia protest who wants tofu delivered to her. Yes. Matt Gaetz. Sure. AOC. I'll put on a T-shirt. So anyway, so that's the formulation. Before we get into kind of the red line argument, the merits of this case on Israel, because I guess this is another area where I do think we have a disagreement. I just don't think that anything that Joe Biden did was that bad, actually. I think that it made a lot of sense. I think if you listen to Jake Sullivan kind of explain it in much more detail, maybe the timing of it, the way he phrased it was maybe not great. Jake Sullivan's much more extensive explanation the next day at the White House press conference, I think, was very defensible. There's concerns in the region among our allies about they're trying to cut a deal with Saudi. There's a lot of concerns with Saudi with the way that a Rafah invasion would go. So I think that there are a lot of different contingencies here, and I think that Biden's position is very defensible. So just on the merits of Biden's choice, why did that concern you? And let's just kind of talk about the Israel issue first before we get into the voting side of it.
Tim, principally because the more distance that Biden shows with Israel, to me, just strengthens the bad guys. And maybe you disagree, but to me, from the beginning after October 7th, there should have been publicly no daylight between us and Israel. I believe that generally, but especially after October 7th. So when Biden says shit that makes it clear that he's not happy with what Israel's doing, that only strengthens Hamas and doesn't give Hamas any motivation to release the hostages or put down their arms or do whatever. So I think to me, that's the greatest danger. I know Biden's in a tough spot because Israel's made some big old mistakes, but I just don't think you show that daylight. It just strengthens the bad guys.
Yeah. I guess my question is, in the medium term, for Israel to be strong and secure, they need friends, and they need America to be their friend, but also they need friends in the region. They need other friends in the West. And if their actions are turning off all of these other friends and the U.S. is the last friend, then isn't the best thing for us to do to try to nudge them and be like, hey guys, like this is not actually in your interest for your security. If we want to get the Saudis on board, if we want a longer term, solution to this, we're like, you're going to have to dial this back a little bit because there's just this righteous outrage that's happening throughout. Maybe some people might not think it's righteous, but they feel like it's a righteous outrage. It's happening through Europe, through the more moderate countries in the region. And so, this is Reagan did this. Other presidents have done this. Like, isn't that what kind of being a good friend is about? Telling your friend that they're going overboard and that we need to dial it back?
I as a friend, I'd say that privately. And again, Tim, I just go back to what October 7th was. I mean, it was the equivalent of 50,000 Americans being killed in one morning on American soil. By one terrorist organization who came across the border in Texas and killed 50,000 Americans. If that happened, there's no fucking way America is going to care about what the rest of the world says when it comes to how we respond. I will acknowledge that what Israel is doing is not necessarily winning friends, but we knew this would happen no matter what Israel did, because this is always the deal. Hamas attacks Israel, Israel responds, the world attacks Israel's response. Israel should have known that going in. If I were Israel, Tim, I just would have gone in and wiped out Hamas within the first 2.5 months. I think they've dragged this on way too long.
Yeah, now we're here. And I guess that's the other thing. And so maybe I take that point. Maybe that would have been better delivered privately. But, and we have a point where it's not as if Israel is fully in lockstep on this. I mean, you had the defense minister, just the other day, Gallant, saying that Netanyahu's got tough decisions ahead, that he's got to give us a plan. Like, if he's going to go into Rafah, there has to be a post-Rafah plan. And this has been my frustration from the start. I'm always like directionally and sympathetically defensive of Israel for all the reasons you just laid out, just the horrific nature of this attack. They're our allies. Hamas has no redeeming qualities. But like, even from the start, I at the Bulwark, I've been the most squishy probably on this, because I keep saying, I don't understand what the plan is, right? Like, I'm okay with, if you're like, we're going to go eradicate Hamas, cool. It's like, okay, we're going to go eradicate Hamas and kill 30,000 other people. I'm a little less cool about that. We're going to go eradicate Hamas and kill 30,000 people, and we don't know what the hell is going to happen afterwards. We don't know who's going to be in charge. We don't have a plan. We don't have any allies that are coming in to be a security. Maybe we'll take over. And maybe Jared Kushner's plan is we're going to build condos. Like, now I'm off I'm off. Okay. I'm not signing up for that. And even the defense minister is saying this, right? Like, doesn't that lend a little bit more credibility to the Biden position on this?
And look, Tim, Bibi shouldn't be around. And I came out like 2 weeks after October 7th and said Bibi needs to resign now. I think it would have been a heroic move for Israel if Bibi had stepped down, because it's enabled the world to call this Netanyahu's war, whereas this is Israel's war. And I do think, Tim, to buttress your argument, Netanyahu doesn't like Biden. Netanyahu wants Trump to get elected, and that's a problem. So I can, and Biden knows that. So I can see why that might have been part of why Biden fought back publicly. Look, to your point, what Hamas did put Israel in an untenable position. You invade, you butcher, slaughter 1,200 of our people. Then you go back into Gaza and hide behind your civilians. What's Israel supposed to do? And most of the people who don't like what Israel's done, it probably isn't you. Most of the critics have not given me any kind, or someone like me, a good explanation of what they would have done. How would you have handled that? And a terrorist organization that spent 20 years basically embedding their civilian infrastructure with their terror infrastructure. It's a real big, tough problem.
Yeah, I do. I think that's a fair criticism of some of the critics, because I'm with that. I think it's very challenging, and I think they had to do something. And I agree with you that it should have been more swift, and there would have been blowback, but it was necessary, and it's not easy. Like they're learning. The Israel people that are more military experts than me, because I try not to get in on like what exactly the military strategy should be. That's not my expertise. But they say they've been learning and getting better. And just one more. There's another group here that I feel like their arguments are disingenuous. I want to get into it because I think they're more kind of aligned with where you are at on the Israel issue broadly. That you hear now from the right and from the Never Trumper crowd. This gets us into the folks at Jonah are tweeting about like, Biden is doing this to appeal to Dearborn. Biden is doing this to appeal to the campus protesters. And I just don't think that's true, and I think it's a slander of Biden. And I want to come to his defense on it because I have right here. Here's Sullivan the day after. The president's made clear that the United States wants to see Hamas defeated and justice delivered. There can be no equivocation on that. We're continuing to send military assistance, et cetera, et cetera. Like they're trying to appeal to, I think, what is the center left that is getting mad at Biden over the extent of this war. I don't think they are trying to appeal to Dearborn. I think they're trying to appeal to their ally, to the Saudis. I think they're trying to appeal to other allies in the region, and they're trying to appeal to people in the center who are directionally supportive of Israel, but that are rightly saddened by the pictures that they're seeing out of Gaza and the reports that they're hearing from people there. It's like that is something that kind of pisses me off. I don't like. Do you think that's fair? Like, do you think that Biden is appealing to the campus protesters, or what do you think their strategy is politically?
Tim, I'd probably be in between you and some of the critics that say that. And I wonder if you agree with this. This is a tough issue when this happened, because this issue, support for Israel, divides the Democratic coalition. I mean, I'm an off the charts Israel guy. The right, Republicans, are generally lockstep supporting Israel. Tim, for a lot of different reasons.
Except for a handful of the neo-Nazis. There's a small vote. Yeah.
For a lot of different reasons, but the right is completely pro-Israel. The left isn't, and the Democratic coalition isn't. So here's something happens that divides Biden's coalition. Yeah. What do you do if you're Biden politically? To me, Biden should do what is in his head and his heart and what he thinks is right. And I think we saw that the first month after October 7th. That was the Joe Biden. And Tim, I wish then when Biden was starting to get shit from his left flank, I wish Biden would have had a respectful Sister Souljah moment with his left and said, this is who I am. I'm going to listen to you. I'll counsel Israel that they got to be better, but I'm standing with Israel, no doubt about it. And I think if Biden had done that, go ahead, Tim.
Didn't he do that? I guess that's my question. Like, didn't he do that? Everybody's like, I'm waiting for Biden to distance himself from the left. Yeah, Biden's not down on the quad at GW wearing a kafia. Like, Biden's not doing hashtag from the river to the sea. Biden was with Israel for months, in the face of these protests. That's the thing so I'm like, why doesn't he get credit for that?
Well, I think, generally he has, because most Americans believe he's been pro-Israel, and generally he has. I think in the last 2 to 3 months, he's got this split coalition, so he's kind of been veering back and forth. Look, he's 81, Tim. I think 20 years ago, if this happens, Biden goes to one of the student protests and he sits down with 20 students who are activists for the Palestinian cause. And he has a tough, frank, respectful conversation with them. He's not capable of doing that. I don't think I don't think Biden's being hurt necessarily with young people by this issue. I think most Americans see him kind of vacillating, and I think that's hurting him generally with other Americans in the middle.
Like from a strength perspective, you think that
from a strength
it's less
and
about
resolution
the details of the policy, but like that this guy has. Yeah, it goes back to the age thing. Like the complaint is like a little bit less about the details of the policy, a little bit more about, is he driving events or is he, a dithering old man that's getting pushed around?
And Tim, by the way, you're the political expert. I'm not, but Biden gives.
I mean, you got elected once. I never got elected before.
I got lucky. I rode a Tea Party wave. Biden gives a speech on Holocaust Remembrance Day, and he says our support for Israel is ironclad. The next day, he goes on CNN and says, "I'm cutting off offensive weapons." The optics of that was like kind of odd.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't make him look strong.
I guess this goes back to my point, and maybe he's just doing a bad job of enunciating this. But like, to me, he has been ironclad with Israel as compared to peer countries. I mean, look at what the French, like what the Euros are doing. I don't know. I think that you can. I don't see I understand why you see a conflict. I don't see a conflict by saying we are ironclad with Israel. I am horrified by anti-Semitism that is occurring in this country. It's occurring all the time. We saw an example in Washington just yesterday, and Washington State, and and also saying, all right, but BB, the best strategic path here, isn't, going ham in Rafah with no allies and no plan and a lot of casualties. Like, you know what I mean? Like, are those things in conflict, being ironclad and also having some strategic advice and some strategic limits on a partner?
Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. Again, if I were in the White House, I'd be doing a lot of what Biden's doing, but I'd be doing it privately. And I certainly wouldn't tell Israel how to fight this war, but I demand that Israel has a plan for the day after. And they haven't. And that's on Bibi. And that's a real concern. Tim, a lot of this is analogous to the economy and all of Biden's domestic accomplishments. I mean, he's had a hell of a record. And I say that as a Tea Party guy. Yeah. But Biden's been unable to communicate that. I think you're right that generally Biden has been pro-Israel. I see a little more vacillation, but Biden has not been able to communicate, I think, effectively how pro-Israel he's been.
Yeah. I meant to ask you this at the top, so let's just do a quick aside on the economy thing. We hashed this out last night at our live event, which people can listen to on the Next Level feed today. If you want to listen to that, Sarah, JBL, and I. If you were I know that you're not a strategist, you were a candidate, but let's say Uncle Joe calls you up tomorrow to have a little Joe chat. And it's like, I just don't know how to talk about this economy situation. We hit record highs, S&P 500 down, NASDAQ yesterday, unemployment slow, wage growth is up. People are still annoyed and frustrated by butter prices, though. And I get it. People are still annoyed and frustrated by airplane prices. But even still, Memorial Day, record travel is expected. Report came out. If you're Joe Biden, do you tell him, you got to do Morning in America and say, we did this, we did the recovery, great American recovery? Or do you say, I got to go out and say, I understand you're frustrated. I understand you're annoyed, but we're on the right path. Our path is working. Their path won't. Like, which one of those messaging tacks would you take, do you think?
Oh, clearly, Tim, the latter. Fuck Morning in America, because, that ain't where we are. Clearly the latter. Again, Biden should have done this from the beginning. From the moment he got elected, he should have gotten in front of the American people and said, we just went through a once-in-a-lifetime health crisis. This economic recovery is going to happen, but man, it's going to be wild and bumpy and shit's going to be expensive. He needed to paint that picture at the beginning. He never did. But I think what he should do is not talk and listen. Get out there with small groups of Americans and listen to how they feel about the economy. That interview, Tim, that he did with Aaron Burnett again, and she asked him about the economy, and he looked upset and he rattled off a bunch of fucking statistics. Hello.
And he kind of lied about the inflation
Show
numbers.
me some empathy. Show some empathy for how people feel. That's always been a strength of his, by the way.
Yeah. I don't know. That's compelling. I'm really torn on this, and I just have to say I'm torn internally. Like, if I wake up one day and I'm like, we should do Morning in America. Fuck these guys. Everything is great. Like, every airport I'm in is packed. Every hotel I'm in is packed. I was at a Bad Bunny concert last Tuesday. It's expensive. It was sold out. I was at a Beyonce concert last summer. It was sold out. I was at Mardi Gras this year. Everyone is out and having a good time. I get it. There's some annoying. But so part of me wants to be like, people, grow up. Like, things are really good. They're not perfect, and it's never perfect, but things are really, really good. And part of me wants to do that, and then part of me wants to do the empathy thing. I just don't know. I think it's a close run call. No,
but I think if he had sat you and me down the day he was sworn in, I think it would have been a combo, and I would have wanted a speech like what you just said right when he got elected. Here's what this is going to look like. Now, grow up, Americans, and get ready, because this is going to be a really bumpy ride the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
I wish he had done more of that from the beginning. But now to come in this late and to say, what the fuck do you mean? Look at the stock market. That's not going to.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. Let's go back to the red line combo. Just because I'm genuinely curious. What would be your red line? Because I was being cheeky when I said I'd vote for the tofu girl at Columbia, but also
that was a
true.
Fucking great line, by the way.
Thank you. But it's also true. It is all. I was like in my head, I'm like, who are the most ridiculous people that I could think of that I would vote for over Donald Trump? And her and Matt Gaetz were the first two people that came to it. I wanted to represent both sides of the spectrum, and I was like, so anyway, I'm genuine about that. So okay, and I know you and I are like basically exactly in line in how we're
hip to hip. We're hip to hip. Baby.
So why is there a red line for you? What would it be? And just to talk through that, because I'm curious.
Well, two things, Tim. And by the way, I think this is a fascinating conversation among us never Trumpers. I think it's really important. I think it's cool. Second point. When I first saw your tweet of mine, even though you were respectful, part of me wanted to fire back at you a little bit, but I couldn't because you cracked me up. Your line about the tofu girl completely disarmed me. Fuck. I couldn't say, so I had to say, okay, Tim's great. Tim, respect right back at you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I knew as soon as I sent it, I was like, if Joe's going to feel like I'm picking on him, but you use the word red line, and I'd already been in this exchange with Jonah, and I was like, the red line phrase, I was like, this is a good way for me to be as clear as I possibly can about how radical my anti-Trump views are. So anyway, I
didn't get pissed off. Respectful. I got more just a little pissed off when I saw your line to Jonah when I think you said these people are children. Yeah. I wanted to say, come on, Tim. But again, that was because I know you, and that made me smile as well. Look, I'll never vote for Trump. And I hear you that you'd vote for that girl who requested tofu at Columbia over Trump. But I think, Tim, we all have a red line for any candidate. And I threw out a bunch of extreme ones. If Biden said, I want to get rid of the Second Amendment or the First Amendment, I'm gone. Then I couldn't support him. If Biden said, and I think you might have agreed with this, if Biden said, no, I refuse to commit to accepting the results of the election, you might have had an issue with that.
Yeah,
I think we can't not have a red line with any candidate, or any candidate can do whatever they want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just like, let's just play with it though. Let's do counterfactuals, because I had to do this in 2020, and it was like hard for me for a second, but then it was kind of liberating when I said it out loud. What would you have done about Bernie or Elizabeth Warren?
Tim, when I got out of my silly, stupid primary challenge against Trump that day, I went on CNN and I said, I'll support whoever the hell the Democratic nominee is, because Trump's got to be stopped, and that's where I've always been.
I remember having a funny conversation with Bill Kristol. I can remember where I was when Elizabeth Warren was like at her peak in the polls, and he calls me, and I'm pacing outside on my phone, and he's like, what are we going to do if it's Warren? And I was like, I think we're for Warren. And he goes,
Yeah.
I think we're for Warren too. And we both kind of smiled. We both like laughed at each other like, okay, well, I guess this is the world that we're in. That to me says you don't really have sure, you have a hypothetical red line, but like nobody actually in America, like, you know, it's not as if Joe Biden, like, let's say Joe Biden said tomorrow, I'm going to stop all offensive weapons to Israel because of something that happens. Let's just use the Israel construct. Like, what could Joe Biden do, you think, that would get... Because I heard from other people after my flippant hit on Jonah, I heard from other people who were not necessarily on the Jonah side of the argument, but were more sympathetic to the argument that, like, man, Biden could lose me. Biden could lose me. Again, Biden couldn't lose me, but I'm just curious. What could he do on Israel that you think would make him lose you?
And when you and I say, or when I say Biden could lose me, again, Trump will never get
It's not
there.
hashtag Trump 2024 like Cliff Aston said.
But look, Tim, you've got me by the short hairs, because when I say Biden's lost me, then I've got to be consistent. Then not voting for Biden is helping Trump. And that's why I jump on guys like Sununu and Pence and all the rest. Right. Screw them. So, I that's somewhat hypocritical. So what could Biden do on Israel that would lose me? If Biden came out tomorrow and he was so pissed off at what Israel's doing and he said, okay, I'm not even talking offensive weapons anymore. We're done now funding the Iron Dome and all defensive weaponry that we give Israel to defend itself. We will no longer help Israel defend themselves. So we're not going to supply that stuff. Oh my gosh, Tim, you'd have to hold me back. You'd have to hold me back.
Yeah. Okay. That'd be tough. All right.
He won't do that. But you're right. He won't do that.
We're closer aligned. Jonah's a little bit more to the right. And so Jonah went after me just a little bit in good spirits. We've been DMing about it. It's all good. It's just a friendly disagreement, but I want to play a little bit, if you don't mind, just from what he,
Tim, I was going to ask you a question and I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's do it. But then we'll listen to Jonah. Yeah. What was your question?
Where is Jonah on Biden? Like, is Jonah the kind of never Trumper who would vote for Biden?
Jonah, I forget if he gave a very long, as is his one, he calls it the ruminant. So he ruminates for a long time. So I forget if it's in this clip, but that we're about to play next. But his position is essentially that he doesn't want to vote for either of them. That if he lived in a swing state, that if he felt like he had to vote for one of them, he'd prefer Biden, but he would still be tempted to vote third party. Actually, some of this I think is in the clip. Let's just listen.
Statistically, your vote doesn't matter that much. I think that makes the case all the more for symbolic voting, but by which I mean writing in someone like Mitt Romney or Ben Sass or Mitch Daniels or whoever. But again, we've had this argument a bunch of times. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it, which sort of gets to my point of how it's not necessarily easy to be anti-Trump. I would put it to you, it's much easier if you're going to be anti-Trump to do what Tim and a bunch of other people do or did and just simply say, okay, I'm a Democrat now.
Fuck that. Tim Miller. Now I'm with you. I'm back hip. Let the world know I'm back solidly aligned with Tim Miller. Good God.
Yeah. I don't.
That's bullshit.
That annoys me because it also annoys me because actually public people who are podcast hosts and writers, like your opinion on who people should vote for actually does matter a lot more than just a single vote, right? Because you can influence people. And I just sort of also reject the whole notion of we should write in to send a message. Like you're sending a message to nobody. It's like a personal thing. It's like this is about self-actualization more than it is about actually voting. Like one of these two guys is going to be the next president. And if you feel strongly that one's better than the other, you should be with them, even if you have some disagreements. Let's just hold on. Jonah, there's a longer, Jason, when you play 2 and 3 together, there's one more longer clip of his I want to play to be fair and give a more full view of what he was saying.
Tim's a political guy. A lot of the people who are aping Tim's arguments are political guys, saying that people who are legitimately and rightly furious at what Biden is doing are children or knaves or fools, and that they should suck it up and support Biden no matter what. I think they're wrong on the merits, but I think that's politically idiotic. Like, I thought the whole point was to convince people to vote for Biden. Well, calling them idiots and fools and children and all this kind of stuff for even having a problem with Biden. And again, they didn't say it publicly. They said it to me over text messages. And that's what I mean. People just wildly just ran to these crazy conclusions. It's like this panic set in. But this blanket sort of condemnation, contempt for anybody who has a problem with what Biden did, I think just sort of is extremely revealing of the mindset that's going on here. And remember when I had Tom Nichols on The Remnant, which was one of the more controversial episodes of The Remnant I had in a while, you know, I asked him the question, why are you guys such cheap dates? You know, I did it in a friendly way, but, you know, the point stands is like, I totally get joining the coalition with Democrats against Trump if you believe Trump is as terrible as a lot of people correctly, in my view, believe he is. What I don't get is why you shouldn't demand something from Biden or Democrats in return. Nikki Haley keeps getting these just powerful numbers in these primaries.
Enough of Joe.
That's enough.
Why can't?
Okay, there you go. Joe, where are you on all of that?
My God, Tim, and understand, I'm closer to Jonah on Israel than I'm probably closer to you.
Yeah.
But what an arrogant summation that is. And I go back to like what you and I have done, like we're all in with Biden or whoever the Democratic nominee is, like that's somehow easier. Excuse me, Jonah, by being all in with Biden in 20 and again, it's basically fucking ruined my career. It's not an easy decision for a Tim Miller to make. I'm really bothered by that. To me, the easy thing to do is say, I'm going to write in Mitt Romney or I'm going to write in Ronald Reagan. This is analogous, Tim, to all of my former congressional colleagues, Republicans, who say Trump is unfit, but I won't vote for Biden. The reason they say that is because when you say Trump is unfit, I will vote for Biden, you end your career electorally as a Republican. I'm done. Kinzinger's done as a Republican. I think it's the same thing in your biz. I think a lot of these conservative thinkers and talkers, Jonah acknowledged Trump's unfit, but he won't take that step. So because he wants to stay relevant, he doesn't want to lose, kind of the in-between Republicans and conservatives who are still hanging on. I cheap date. Calls you a cheap date, me a cheap date, because we believe Trump's a fucking existential threat to this democracy. So we're going to vote for the one fucking guy who can beat him. Now that pisses me off. I'm sorry. Now that's the old, sounds like the old Joe Walsh.
This makes me so happy. I was preparing my rant, but it turns out you already did my whole rant for me. You already did my whole rant for me. I'll add one thing. Well, firstly, I just want to say you did good on you, by the way, and you did really hard your career. It was tough. And talk radio, it's unbelievable. So few people did it. Charlie did it, and I gave him a lot of credit for that. You did it, and there's a reason why so few people did it. So good on you. The cheap date thing, though, is the part I wanted to get into, which is why we played it for so long. Because like it is actually the same argument that some of our listeners, some left-wing people made about me when I would say, you know what, if push came to shove, if we got to the Louisiana primary and it was Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, and it was close, I would tell people to vote for Ron DeSantis. I fucking hate Ron DeSantis. Okay, yeah. I feel about Ron DeSantis, I guess, how some of these people feel about Joe Biden. I don't understand why you'd feel that way about Joe Biden, but whatever. Let's just accept that that's legit and not oppose. I fucking hate Ron DeSantis. Like the shit that he did in schools with kids just boils my blood. All right, and so, but I was like, I would do it. Because I see Trump as an existential threat, and voting is not about self-actualization. Voting is about chicken or fish. You pick we're one of these two people are going to be the president. Maybe voting is about self-actualization if it's a state senate, you know what I mean, some random thing, or if it's a primary, you're trying to put your best person forward. I think there's a lot of times it makes sense in a primary, you know, where there are three good candidates, you like one the best, they're in last place, but you vote for them anyway as a signal, right? But this is like, is it Trump or is it not Trump?
Yeah.
You know, is it the mercury fish or is it the chicken? And I was like, I would have voted for DeSantis and I would have done it happily. Because it would have meant we were done with Trump. And I was convinced that Ron DeSantis was not going to end our democracy. Nobody was going to charge the Capitol wearing Ron DeSantis flags or hats. You know, like he doesn't elicit that kind of support. So then I would have been for Joe Biden in the general, obviously. But, you know, that would have solved our problem. And this is the thing in the general. It's far less close to me than that in this general election. Why am I a cheap date? Yeah, I'm a cheap date because Donald Trump is a threat to everything that we hold dear.
Yeah.
Like the tail end risk of Donald Trump is literally the end of America. Will it actually happen? I don't know. JVL wrote yesterday about what the best case for Trump is. The best case for Trump is still pretty bad. But the risk of Trump is so great that I am a cheap date. I'm asking for nothing. I get calls from reporters sometimes that like, don't never Trumpers want Joe Biden to appoint a Republican into the cabinet. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe some do, but I don't. Like Liz Cheney becoming Secretary of Treasury or Commerce or whatever, like Deputy Secretary of State. That'd be great. I hope she gets that job if she wants it. But like that doesn't change my view about Joe Biden at all. Like my view about Joe Biden, I have things that I like about him. I have things that I've been disappointed in. I think he's a little too old. But like the decision here is about, can we have Donald Trump as president? And if you think he's an existential threat, which Jonah and a lot of these folks say they do, then that's it. Then yeah, I'm a cheap date. Fine.
So
okay.
Tim, you nailed it. If you truly believe Trump is an existential threat, and I do and you do, then the only logical play is vote for the only guy who can beat him. And so it makes one wonder, does Jonah really believe he's an existential threat? Is Jonah just doing this like a lot of Republican members of Congress just to stay relevant?
Right.
Because once you commit to going there, Biden, I'm in with Biden, a lot of things end.
It's over. One more thing just on the children thing, and I get that people get their backs up when I call them children, but I just want to explain what I mean by that. Like in life, as a grown-up, a lot of times you have to make tough choices, you know? Like this is the point that I'm making. Like a lot of people who are in way worse situations than me, you know, in their life, financial life, where they're like, man, I've got to decide, is my family going to be able to have this or that? Right? Like, and I don't like, as a grown up, you know, I give the example sometimes of like, if you have a kid and you're in a shitty school district and you don't have enough money for private school, and like, if you spend money on private school, then you can't do something else in your life. You have to make a choice. You have to make a grown up choice. Like, should I put my kid in a bad school? Like, should I homeschool, but then I can't work? Should I pay for private school and then we can't go on vacations? We can't do whatever. We can't, you know, afford something else in our family budget like that. Those are hard grown-up choices that people face every day. There are two choices. They don't like either of them. One is though preferable to the other. Like that's what this election is. Like you have to make a grown-up choice about this. Like it's not about your feelings or, you know, like about, the candidate has to make my heart sing or be perfect. And like that, I think that is what fundamentally had me lashing out about the red line question. So anyway, do you have any final thoughts
Tim,
on that?
It's a great point. I'll close on my point with this in that I think we all do have a red line. Mine is way out there for Biden.
Yeah.
Way out there.
Yeah.
I think you have one, and it would have to be way out there.
Yeah. Fair.
But you believe in your head and your heart Trump's a threat, as do I. Yeah. So end of story. The Democratic nominee is our vote, period.
Yeah, you have to act as such. Exactly right. Oh, this has been gratifying. This has been a gratifying Thursday, Joe Walsh. I'm so glad we did this. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with me. Please come back to the podcast soon. Wait, hold on. The social contract. What's this? Tell me about the social contract.
In 30 seconds, Tim, you know I was a very divisive political asshole. I'm trying to spend the rest of my life making up for that. So I've launched a program called the Social Contract. We're trying to get Americans to agree to be more tolerant, respectful, and more informed with each other.
How can people learn about that?
Go to follow me on Twitter at Walsh Freedom. We'll explain it there.
All right. We'll keep checking it out. Joe Walsh, he hosts the podcast White Flag with Joe Walsh. Please come back to the Bulwark soon. We have a very important, very serious, not a fun weekend podcast this week. We got a very serious podcast coming at you tomorrow, but I'm very excited for the conversation. So please come back then. Thanks to Joe Walsh. Thanks to everybody that came out in DC last night. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace.